This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so I think that means we're official. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to hop on this webinar, especially when I know that everyone is probably a little bit sick of video conferencing and communication, but you know, it's what we have available to us, and at the end we'll all be pros at this. So just wanted to start by thanking you guys for taking the time to jump on. My name is Molly Fitzpatrick. I am the clerk and recorder here in Boulder County, and I'll do a little bit more or provide a little bit more information about my background in just a moment. But wanted to set some context for the reason that we wanted to host this webinar. So last year was a very busy year in many ways. We had an incredibly busy legislative session, and then we also knew that we were looking ahead towards a very busy 2020. And so we really wanted to take the time to ensure that our community members knew about the big election year ahead, and also knew about the changes and what would be new as we look ahead toward 2020. So one thing that we did was we did a lot of community presentations and outreach events. And these were really well attended events, which signaled to us that we really wanted to, or it really signaled to us how important it was to keep up the conversation with our community members. And so, you know, a lot of those events were held at community gathering spots. We had a presentation at the museum, and also some breweries and coffee shops. And so although this isn't as fun as meeting in person at one of those events, I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to be here on this webinar, and just happy to have the conversation with you guys. So Machel, if you want to go to the next slide. So a little bit about me. I have lived in Boulder County for going on 13 years. I am a CU grad who was originally from South Carolina. And if you detect an accent, that's why. It usually comes out a little bit more in election times, probably because of the go, go, go space that we find ourselves in. And I was elected in 2018 and started this position in 2019. So I've been here for about a year and a half. Prior to this position, I was in the voter rights and voter engagement space. So I'm on the administration side. So the circle is more or less complete, although this industry is always evolving and changing, as you'll see in this presentation. So it's really been a great experience so far. And one of the things that I have most enjoyed as clerk, well, there's two things really. One, you know, I know that there's a lot of national dialogue going on right now about elections, and you might have heard that Colorado is considered a leader in accessibility and also security. And so it's fun to have those bragging rights. And the other thing that I really enjoy is that Colorado is in such a great space of how secure and accessible our model is. So at this point, we're really doing a lot of tinkering and perfecting. We're not overhauling our system because we already are so advanced, especially in context of the rest of the country. And so, you know, it's really fun to work in that space and to be a resource for other states as they look to adapt their election model to be more closely tied to the Colorado model. So, if you want to go to the next slide, Machel, and I'm actually going to turn my camera off as well. Okay, so as the invite said, we wanted to provide an overview of voting statistics in Boulder County, and also some of the changes and what you can expect for 2020. And so this slide represents voter registration statistics for Boulder County. And so the top three buckets of parties or affiliation, rather, we have Democrats, unaffiliated, and then Republicans. And as you can see, the voter registration rolls have increased significantly since 2015. We're currently at 217,000 active registered voters, and that's a really big increase from 2015, which I think goes to show the immense growth of not only Boulder County, but also our state as well. If you want to go to the next slide. So this slide represents turnout rates for every year since 2012 for active voters. Active voters are folks that are registered to vote whose ballot was not returned to us as undeliverable. Most frequently is because the most frequent reason of why it might be returned to us as undeliverable is because they might have moved and we have an old address on file for them, for example. You'll see that we have a very high turnout rate in Boulder and in Colorado. Colorado was second in turnout in 2018, and we were only behind Minnesota, and they had a federal race on the ballot, and I think they actually had 2 federal races on the ballot. They had 2 U.S. Senate races, and so when you think about it, a state that has that sort of high-profile race, of course, gets more money and more attention and therefore more turnout. And so for us in 2018, the top of our ticket was the governor's race. And it just really signals, I think, the high interest and engagement that voters in our state have, and also how accessible our model is. So we're really proud in Boulder County of how high our turnout rate is, and then also as for our state as well. So in 2020, one more thing, Machel, I was just going to say is in 2020, we are, of course, expecting a record turnout. There was an article in the Atlantic that I love to mention that says, "Prepare for a voter tsunami." And that is exactly what we are doing. The trends are extremely supportive of a high turnout general election. Young voter turnout will be very high. Young voters were up 35% in turnout from 2014 to 2018, and then we also had record turnout in 2018 overall. And so with that, we have been preparing our processes accordingly, stress testing our processes for volume, ensuring that we are staffed appropriately, implementing changes in 2019 in advance of 2020, like drop boxes, for example. And so there are just a lot of things that we have done to prepare for that high turnout. And one thing that I'm not sure if I mentioned clearly, but in 2020 we have 3 elections, and we are currently in election 2 out of 3. The first election of 2020 was the presidential primary, which was Super Tuesday, as you all probably remember. The presidential primary was a voter-initiated primary after the 2016 caucuses. And so if you attended the 2016 caucuses, you might remember that there were some issues with long lines and that sort of thing, which makes sense on one hand because these caucuses are being run by volunteers, and it was chaotic because of the turnout. And so voters did direct that our offices actually conduct a presidential primary instead of a caucus. And so this was the first presidential primary that the state had run and counties had run in nearly 2 decades. And it came with it a slew of exciting changes. One of them was that 17-year-olds were able to participate in this primary. And I mentioned earlier that in 2019, there were several legislative changes in advance of 2020, and this was one of them. So if you are a 17-year-old and you will be 18 by the general election, you are eligible to participate in both the presidential primary and the summer primary as well. So one of the things that we did is we ran a big outreach campaign to these 17-year-olds and partnered with both the St. Vrain School District and the Boulder Valley School District to create High School Voter Registration Awareness Week, which was essentially a hype week for voter registration and awareness, ensuring that 17-year-olds knew about this new opportunity to participate, and also that teachers, administrators, and parents knew as well. And we were really proud of the results and had one of the highest turnouts of 17-year-olds in the entire state. So this slide represents voter turnout by party affiliation in Boulder County for the presidential primary. And I will let you all just look at this for a moment and let the numbers just speak for themselves. Okay, Machel, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so again, we are in election 2 out of 3. This election is a statewide primary election, which I'll go into a bit more detail in just a moment. And The election date is June 30th, and then of course we have our November 3rd general election as well. Okay, so wanted to review some of the need to knows to participate in the June primary election. And we will circulate a video link to everyone on this call as a follow-up. We did create a 60-second version of this information. So we would love for you to share it with your family and friends. So there are, like I said, the primary election date is on June 30th, and the Democratic, Republican, and Libertarian parties are holding primaries. And as you all hopefully received your ballot, you have seen the contest on the ballot, but it includes U.S. Senate, Congress, Regent, State Senate, and State House, the District Attorney, and County Commissioner race. And unaffiliated voters are able to participate in this primary election. They will automatically receive the ballots for both parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, in the mail, and they can only vote and return one. And the only exception to that is if they selected a preference that was several weeks ago to only receive one ballot. Otherwise, they'll automatically receive both, but can only vote and return one. And again, if you're going to be 17 years old, or if you know a 17-year-old in your life who will be 18 by November 3rd, they can participate in the primaries. And again, that's a change from the 2019 legislative session. We have a lot of safety precautions because of the pandemic, which we'll review at the end. And again, we'll circulate that video that goes over all of this information in a much more fun manner. And a quick highlight of the calendar for this particular election. Some of the most important dates are when ballots were mailed to our military and overseas voters. And then on June 8th is when we mailed ballots to voters. And then we also have an upcoming deadline on June 22nd, which is Monday. And so that's the deadline for folks to register to vote online or update their voter registration to have our office automatically send them a ballot. But after that, voters may still go to a voter service center to actually register, update, and vote. There is no voter registration deadline in Colorado, but we do have a deadline to receive a mail ballot automatically. And then, of course, Election Day is June 30th, and the deadline to vote is by 7 p.m. So, wanted to review elections in Colorado broadly. So I refer to Colorado as an all-options state. So every registered voter automatically gets a ballot in the mail. And what they choose to do with that ballot is their choice. They can mail it in, they can drop it off at a voter service center or drop box anywhere in the state, or they can just go in and vote in person. And again, it's never too late to register to vote. Voters may register and vote on the same day as the election. And they do need to show ID as well in that particular instance. And we overall have a unique model in Colorado that is highly regarded across the state across the country for both accessibility and security. And we did do a overhaul, I would say, in 2013 of how we conduct elections, and have seen a lot of benefits from that overhaul. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are many ways to return your ballot, and throughout all parts of the process, I wanted to emphasize how important security of the ballots is for our team. So for example, we have bipartisan teams collect the ballots from those 24-hour boxes. And on top of that, we leverage our award-winning ballot box tracking system, which again has won national awards for how it demonstrates security and integrity throughout the process. So we'll have a bipartisan team go out together to actually collect the ballots from that ballot box and transport them back to our office while maintaining chain of custody throughout the process. We also have traditionally had drive-by drop-off locations because we know that even though we're a mail-in ballot state, there's a lot of folks that just love that nostalgia of going into a vote center to actually just go and talk to an election judge and vote in person. And so one of the innovations that we have had in place for several years now is a drive-by drop-off location where folks can just drive up and they can drop off their ballot or hand it to an election judge, and then that person puts it in the into the ballot box, and they can get their I voted sticker. So we're, of course, well, not of course, but we're not doing that this election. We hope to bring it back as soon as we can. But the reason we're not doing that is, of course, to minimize in-person interactions wherever we can. And we do have, again, a lot of drop boxes throughout the county that can be utilized. And then, of course, voting in person is always an option. You can vote in person for any reason at any vote center in your county. You no longer have to go to a precinct location. And one thing that you will hear from our office a lot is the importance of, well, besides the importance of voting, is the importance of voting early. We always encourage people, once they feel confident about their choice and they've made up their mind, it would be, it's an enormous help to our office to go ahead and turn that ballot in as soon as you feel good about your decisions, because we only have so much equipment and so many people in our offices, especially now that we're in this COVID environment. And so the more that people vote early, the more helpful it is to our office, and the more quickly we're able to get results out as well. Okay, so COVID-19 precautions. So, of course, I think many of you can probably anticipate what a lot of our precautions are, but we did want to review them so you can tell your family members or friends if they're, coming to vote in person, for example. So, at our vote centers, we will have processes in place and physical demarcations to create boundaries of 6 feet between all voters and also between the judges and the voting booths. And we'll have plexiglass barriers to check in, and then also face coverings are requested for our voters, and we will provide them for voters that need them. It's very similar to if you were to go to a grocery store, or really, I think most places now, just the importance of keeping people spaced away from each other and minimizing touch points wherever we can. Another feature that we are, or a new feature that we're implementing for this election, is Ballot to Go. And so this was sort of like when you get takeout from a restaurant, you call ahead and you pick it up. And so that was the idea with our Ballot to Go program. And so we will have a number set up starting next week where voters can call ahead to have their ballot prepped and ready for them. So when they arrive on site, we can actually have someone deliver that mail-in ballot to that individual's car. And there's going to be a couple of things that that person will, of course, need to sign and to show to get that mail ballot. But it's a great tool, because then they don't have to come into the vote center, stand in line, be around a lot of people, and they can just get their mail ballot delivered to their car and then turn it in at a 24-hour drop box. And then in our ballot processing center. So this is, again, why we want to emphasize how great it would be for folks to turn in those ballots once they've made up their decision. So our ballot processing center is already a very tight environment. We have 2 floors of our ballot processing center, and we are requiring physical distancing between election judges or plexiglass stations that are built in between judges when they need to work in a bipartisan manner, for example. And we are vastly aware that, ballot processing will take longer because of our precautions. And so we are really working to educate the public about these precautions. And, as always, it takes a significant amount of time if we get a slew of ballots on election day. And so the most important thing is that people feel great about the time they've had to make their decisions. And, it's just going to take us a couple of days, as it always does. And it's going to take us even longer this time. And so we're just trying to communicate expectations for election results as well. Okay, so the next 2 slides are going to guide us through the steps that we take to process ballots once they're received back in our office. And every step of our process is designed to enhance accuracy, security, and transparency. And there are many, many steps that we take during this process as well to support our post-election risk limiting audit. And it goes without saying, of course, that there is a lot of discourse right now around cybersecurity. But we take physical security, or we consider physical security to be just as important as cybersecurity. And so normally we have ballot processing tours where we invite the public in to actually come and see this in action. And of course, we're not doing that this election, but if you were to come to a future ballot processing tour, you would see that we are under camera 24/7 during election time. There are locked cages with restricted access. You have to have badged entry to get into secure areas. And then we also have monitors for the public to observe the process if they can't get up close to the process. And then of course we have signage throughout the building as well that public members and election judges can see what's going on where and what steps are being taken in order to process the ballots. So with that being said, the first step is that ballots are brought back to our office and they are checked in. And then they are removed from their ballot boxes and organized in mail trays to be sorted. And then they're sorted by type. So Longmont ballots, Boulder ballots, so on and so forth. And then we review signatures and verify signatures. And if the signature is verified as a good signature, that voter will receive credit in the statewide voter registration database. And the ballot envelope is then securely transported to the second floor of our ballot processing center for opening and separating. And so on this slide, you know, the ballot is not separated from its ballot envelope. So we can go back to that next slide, Markala. So again, at that point of the process, the ballot is still in its ballot envelope. But when it's ready to go to the second floor of our ballot processing center, that's when it would get removed from its envelope. And so we have these extractor machines on the right-hand side of that image. And again, it's really fun in action to see the envelopes just fly through there. It creates a cut in the top of the envelope, and a worker removes the ballot from its envelope, and then it goes through a process to actually get flattened by a human and reviewed by a human as well to make sure that there's nothing on that ballot that could ever indicate who a person was. So for example, in elementary school and in really, you know, any level of schooling, you're always taught to, you know, if you make a mistake, cross out an initial by your mistake. And that's not something that we want because that could indicate whose ballot that was. And so we'll have a team of folks who are looking at every ballot to see if there's anything like that on it. And then of course, the last step is that the ballots are scanned and votes are captured in our voting system and then generated into reports starting at 7 p.m. on election night. And so to pivot a little bit, we know that election security is a big topic of interest right now. And so we wanted to highlight what our office is doing to protect the integrity of our elections and your information. And we really like to refer to our approach as the 3 pillars of our security posture. And this includes the Colorado election model, our work with partners, and then also our own unique cybersecurity roadmap. Okay, so one aspect of election administration that's valuable to remember is that elections are run in a decentralized manner, more or less. Each state is unique in terms of how they run their elections. And again, Colorado is really considered a true leader when it comes to election security. And this slide has some of the headlines from the press around that. And you know, to speak more to why we are getting some of this recognition, a lot of the components, you know, on the right-hand side are what have made this possible, including same-day voter registration. So if there were ever any sort of question that would come into play with a voter's eligibility, we can all
Did we lose Molly? Okay, I'm going to, she's said her computer just logged off. Let me see if we can get her back on another device quickly to continue. Give us 1 second.
Okay, I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I think it's because I didn't touch my computer for so long because I do have a full charge. Sorry, you guys. A bit of fun in the pandemic. So I think I left off with same-day voter registration, and then the other thing that we have is paper ballots, and that's obviously one thing that is really important to have a paper trail for all of the votes cast in Colorado, because you know that we all know that you can't hack paper, but for us it's really important to keep in mind that we're not letting this create a false sense of security, because there are other really critical components that need to be hardened always. And then, of course, again, we have our chain of custody and our ballot box tracking system, and we have a level of integrity there, of course, with that documentation, and also the bipartisan team of folks who collect those ballots. And then we have our risk limiting audit as well, which is a really neat aspect of something that we do. What the risk limiting audit does is it confirms that the outcomes of our elections are correct. And so essentially it uses a lot of different statistics and modeling to tell us how many ballots we need to look at and verify to confirm that the outcome was correct. And we started doing these audits in Colorado in 2017. And it's, what we're doing is looking at the physical ballots that folks cast, of course, separated from its envelope to protect anonymity, and comparing that to how the voting system actually interpreted that ballot. And so this is the best way that we're able to demonstrate that everything was counted as it should have been counted. And then we do a lot of other things as well, including pre-election testing of all ballots and equipment. And we also do, and that's of course open to the public as well. So if you're interested, please sign up for our email list, because we let folks know on that or social media when those dates are. And we'd love to have folks, although we are working to do those in a more remote fashion this year. The second pillar is our partnerships. And Marcella, if you go to the next slide. So in 2017, our elections was designated as critical infrastructure from the Department of Homeland Security, which was helpful in signaling both to the public sector and also to the private sector that elections really is a top priority, and it's a top national security issue, as well as to voters and the public. That was a really helpful reinforcement. So these are just a handful of local, state, national partners that are out there working to secure our elections, and especially going into this year. And so, as you might be able to tell, there's a lot of different people looking at this, at cybersecurity from a lot of different angles right now, which really signal to us the need to have something specific to Boulder County, which I'll go over in just a moment. But I think there's several things that demonstrate Colorado's commitment and Boulder County's commitment, which is that first off, we have a great partnership with the Secretary of State's office and also other counties in Colorado through the Colorado Clerks Association. We conduct regular tabletop exercises, both in our county and with the state, to practice real life scenarios that could come up. And so that way we've practiced what communication looks like in response as well. And then, of course, our staff participates and is required to get a level of cybersecurity training from the Secretary of State's office. And we also have policies in place for our office as well. Next slide. And I am almost done, you guys, and then we can open it up for questions. I've got like 2 more slides. And so, as we just went over, there are a lot of different organizations looking at cybersecurity. And so You know, it's sort of like one of those things where if everyone's getting inundated with information, it's sort of like, where do you start? And so we actually started our cybersecurity endeavor a long time ago, and most in more modern time, I believe 2011 or 2012 is when we first started doing some formal cybersecurity reviews and assessments to show us where we should go over the next several years to really focus in on the most strategic priorities. And so one framework that we have leveraged in our cybersecurity journey is the NIST framework, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And it's a framework created by some of the smartest minds on cybersecurity from both the public and private sector to improve cybersecurity posture. And so at the top is really the how, it's the approach, and those boxes are really what we're looking at. So for example, incident response plans, we regularly practice and conduct tabletop exercises to practice response. Access points would be an example of having really strong password requirements, also managing passwords through a password vault. Who has access to the information? Do they have the appropriate levels of permission? How are we reviewing what they're doing with their access, and that sort of thing. And then an example of equipment management would be, again, how is that equipment maintained? Is it by a vendor? What is their level of cybersecurity controls, and that sort of thing. And we are working right now to create a community briefing report that spells out a lot of this information because it is a lot of information, and we want to ensure that our community has that resource available in advance of the general election especially. So with that, we can go to the next slide, Marcella. And then this is the last slide I promised you guys. I know it's hard to sit on a webinar and not be able to talk for a while. So, you know, we know that there's a national narrative about the security of our elections, and you know, we just went over that we do have a very secure system in Colorado, and it's going to take all of us working together to really help restore trust in our elections. So when you see the headlines or the news articles, we really encourage folks to look at it critically and think about it through the lens of these 4 criteria, because again, we don't have one type of way that we run elections in the country. And you know, there are some examples of with everything, news being sensationalized, and so you know, we do put a lens of security on all of our processes, and you know, and at the same time, we know that the threat is real, and so we encourage you to get in touch if you have questions or anything of that nature. And so I think that's all I've got. And then this slide, the last slide, is thank you. Votecolorado.gov. Actually, I realized we have it's a mistake in there, but that first link is votecolorado.gov. It tells you that's the website where you go to update your voter registration. And we encourage folks to add their email address so you can get notified of events like this. And then one thing that I really wanted to highlight is Ballot Track. Ballot Track is a tool that voters can sign up for free, and it really, what it does is it tracks the life cycle of your ballot. So we're able to let you know when your ballot has been sent and when it's received back by our office, as well as when it's been counted. And so it's a really great tool just to know where your ballot is throughout the elections process. And then of course, we have all of our social media accounts on there as well. And I would be remiss if I didn't make a plug for being an election judge or worker, if that's something that you'd be interested in. One of my favorite things to say is that it's not just myself or our elections staff running the elections. It is our community members, and it takes all of us working together to implement these elections. And I think it adds an incredible layer of integrity into the process to have, you know, your own friends and your own neighbors overseeing and conducting the election. So with that, I will open it up for any questions that folks have. And Mercala, I'm going to let you handle the logistics of opening folks on.
Everyone should be unmuted, so if people have a question, they could. It's a small group, so they can go ahead and jump in. GoVoteColorado.com works as well. The state only recently added the .gov this last January, so I think either one works just fine.
Perfect, thank you.
Anyone have any questions?
I had one.
Great. Go ahead. We can hear you.
So the first thing that popped into my mind when I saw your ballot to go process is what system is in place. Let's say I got my ballot in the mail, but I choose to do ballot to go to defraud the system. And I got a ballot to go. I go ahead and vote, but then I take the ballot that I already have and submit it in a drop-off box. What systems are in place to keep redundancy or that type of thing out of the process?
Absolutely, that's a great question. And Mercala, could you maybe see if muting yourself would help? Okay, I think that helped. So it's a great question, and it's something that we actually have been, that's a process that's currently in existence, and it's not something new with Ballot to Go. So in Colorado, we are as soon as a voter votes, whether they come in and vote at a vote center, they are marked as having voted. If we receive their mail-in ballot, they're marked as having voted. And if they were to go to a vote center after that and attempt to vote, it would show up that they've already voted. And so anybody that goes through that process, we are required by law to turn over their name to the district attorney for follow-up. And so essentially I would capture that to say we're a first ballot back sort of we have a first ballot back process in place. So whenever we get your ballot, that's considered, you are considered to have voted.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And just to add on to that, Jim, one of the people request replacement ballots all the time. They say it didn't show up. We oftentimes also get follow-up calls from voters saying, oh my God, I didn't realize it was in this mail pile that my roommate, spouse, partner, etc. had on someplace on their desk that I didn't know about. What do I do? Because now I've got 2 ballots and, that type of thing. So, they destroy 1 ballot and submit the one. So, replacement ballots is a pretty normal process of every election.
Awesome. Thank you.
Did anyone else have any? Yes, go for it.
What is the process to get involved in the actual helping you guys out? And is there anything virtual? Is it all physical?
So for this election, first, the best website to get information on how to sign up to be an election judge or an election worker is bouldercountyvotes.org. And so we do have an interest form on our website that you can fill out, and you'll get on the list to be notified when we start hiring for the general election, for example. There's not a role that I can think of that is virtual. We do have roles that are more public facing than others. So for example, working at a vote center is a very public facing role. There are some roles that are more phone oriented. So if you're answering the phones for Ballot to Go and filling in the information and validating that information, you're still in an office environment, but you're not as exposed to other folks. So nothing 100% virtual at this moment, and probably not I can't imagine virtual. So, we are looking for folks that are okay to be in office at a minimum. And I think, Mercala, you were pulling up the website.
Great, thank you.
You can see it on screen here. It's under the election information on the main page. It is a little bit further down. You go here, and then if you fill in on this page has a form to fill in too, and then we collect that data and follow up.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, cool. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate how easy it is to vote in Colorado. So thanks to everyone in the office for making that system work.
Thank you, Sam, for saying that. We really appreciate that, and it's always nice to hear that feedback. And we will relay that to the rest of our team as well. So thanks for saying that. Okay, well, Mercala, I think that's, I don't see any questions coming through on the chat. So everyone, I want to really thank you. And I know I just realized that my name says that I'm Justine. I am Molly. I'm on Justine's GoToMeeting account because we only have a couple of accounts on our team, and she's the one usually doing the GoToMeetings. But I really appreciate everyone taking the time to be here tonight. And please don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that we can do to answer any questions that you have after this presentation, or support you or your friends and family members in the voting process. And we look forward to seeing hopefully some of you soon, maybe an election judge or worker capacity. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.